Welcome to Paper Making with PaperSource. In this video, we'll show you how to make recycled paper, add fun inclusions, and create embossed designs. Here are some of the materials we'll be using. Linter pulp and a mold and decal, a basin, which we'll fill with water, inclusions like seeds and petals, a towel for drying, a sponge or washcloth for blotting, and then paper to recycle. We'll also need a blender. You can use a regular blender or an immersion blender, and then cardboard. How to make your paper. Start by shredding some paper from your recycling bin and adding it to a blender. As an option, you can also drop in a pinch of the cotton linter. This will help make your paper stronger and more durable. A little bit of this goes a long way. Next, cover your paper with water and get ready to blend. Blend until you get your desired consistency. The thicker the pulp is, the more texture there will be in your paper, and the finer it is, the smoother your paper will be. I'm going to blend this one for a while because I'd like it to be a little bit smoother. You can just periodically check the pulp as you go to see if it's where you want it to be. So once you have your desired consistency, you can go ahead and add the pulp to your water bath. So I've got my basin filled up so I have enough room to dip my mold and decal in, and then I'm adding the pulp to the water. So before I dip my mold and decal into the pulp, I like to prep a towel on top of a piece of cardboard so that I can put my piece of paper there when it's done. So then you're going to grab your mold and decal. The mold is the frame with the screen in it, and the decal is the empty frame. You want the mold on the bottom and the decal on top, and just sandwich them together evenly. And then make sure your pulp and water are kind of all blended together evenly. So I just do that with my hand. And then you're going to dip your mold and decal in the water, plunge it down a little bit low, and then start coming up slowly and just kind of shaking the paper fibers around so that they disperse evenly within the mold and decal. And you're just going to take time to let the water drain out, and make sure you don't shake so hard that you move the fibers out of place. Once they've kind of settled in a bit, I'll tilt my mold and decal to let some of that water drain out the sides. So once the water has stopped draining from the mold and decal, then it's time to go ahead and transfer your sheet. So you're going to start by removing the decal from the mold. And next we're going to transfer it to the towel. So I'm simply going to flip this over and press it down on my towel. Before I lift the mold off the towel, I want to blot all the excess water out. So you can use a sponge for this or a washcloth. So I'm just blotting this really thoroughly until I feel like I've picked up most of the water. If you get a lot of water on your washcloth or sponge, you can kind of wring it out partway through to make sure you're really picking up the water. Once you've removed the excess water, slowly peel away the mold and then leave your paper to dry for about 24 hours. One way to create interesting texture and pattern in your paper is to add inclusions. So one example is shredded paper. If you want all of your sheets to have the same inclusions, you can actually dump them straight into the bath and mix them with the pulp. But if you want each sheet to have a different look, then you can actually keep them on the side and sprinkle them on top of your sheet after you've dipped your mold and decal in. So that's the option I'm doing here, just starting with all the same steps and draining all of the water out. And then I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle some scraps of paper on top. So with this technique, the paper scraps will be a little bit more on the surface of the paper as opposed to if we went ahead and mixed them into the pulp ahead of time. But when we go ahead and press some of that excess moisture out of the sheet, it will help embed them into the surface. So just as before, you're going to remove your decal, get that little extra piece back in there, and then you're going to flip over your sheet and press it into the towel. There is a little texture on the towel that I'm using, and that will come through a bit on the paper. So that's something to keep in mind as you're laying out your sheets, is whatever surface you're using, and you can experiment with different surfaces. The paper will pick up a bit of that texture, but that's one of the things that I think is kind of neat about handmade paper. So this step is not only helping remove moisture from the sheet, but it's really helping to embed these little scraps into the main sheet of paper. And now we'll let it dry. Another inclusion option is using dried flower petals. So we'll follow all the same steps as before. You can add the petals to the bath if you want, or you can go ahead and dip your mold in decal, create your sheet, and then sprinkle the petals on top. Similar to what we did with the shredded pieces of paper, these petals will be primarily on one side of your sheet. And when we press that excess moisture out of the paper, it will help embed them into the surface. And once you have all of the water drained out, you can follow the same steps as before. So the last inclusions I'll show is seeds. It's really fun to make seeded paper because you can plant it and have wildflowers grow. For this batch, I actually prepared a pulp that had more of the cotton linter in it. I like having more organic material in there so it breaks down more easily when you plant. So you'll see the pulp looks a little bit different. It's a little bit kind of pulpier, and the water drains more quickly from it. And with this one, I had mixed the seeds directly into the pulp so that they're really embedded in the paper. And then you follow all the same steps to go ahead and remove the excess moisture and let your paper dry. You can also create seeded tags using a pour method with a cookie cutter. So the cookie cutter will replace your decal in this case. So first you're going to actually scoop up some pulp with a cup or a pitcher. And we're going to use this to pour into the cookie cutter. Next, you're going to hold your mold over the bath and center the cookie cutter over top. And then simply pour the pulp into the cookie cutter until you have a nice even layer of pulp inside the circle. Drain out the water, double check to see that it looks even. I have missed a little spot here, so I'm going to just a touch more. And then you can go ahead and transfer it to your towel. So now just follow all the same steps you've done with all the other sheets and leave it out to dry. Now I'm going to show you how you can create embossed designs. Start with all the usual steps to create a sheet of paper. Before you transfer to the towel, add something with a little texture or pattern to it, like for example a piece of ribbon or lace. And then you're going to gently embed that into the surface before you transfer it to the towel. I'm just kind of lightly tacking it in, and I'll really apply more pressure when I transfer. So flip it over and then start pressing out the moisture as usual. This step will not only get rid of the excess moisture, but help really embed that piece of lace into the pulp so that it really transfers the design to the sheet. One thing I like to do is take a look more closely at the sheet after I've lifted the decal or the mold away. And then if I need to, I'll go back in and just blot it a little bit more to get crisper, more defined lines. And I'm just really gentle when I do this so I don't tear the pulp. And from here you let it dry. Another way to create an embossed surface is to create your own design with a glue gun. I like to start by tracing the inside of my decal onto a piece of cardboard so I know what my border is. And then I draw a design within that, keeping it simple. I like to do some test runs with my glue gun so I get the sense of the right amount of pressure to apply for even lines. So I recommend you do that too. And then once you have a good feel for it, you can go ahead and add the design to the cardboard. So you're going to go through all the usual steps to create your piece of paper. The one thing that will be different here is that you're not transferring onto a towel. You're going to transfer directly onto the design you created on the piece of cardboard. So it will help to drain a lot of the excess water out ahead of time, since you won't have that towel to absorb the moisture underneath. And so from here, I'm just going to lay this, just center it over the design that I created on the cardboard. When it comes to blotting the moisture away, this part will probably take a little longer than it did on your other pieces of paper. Sometimes you get some air bubbles kind of forming where the glue is, but you can just be patient with it and slowly press that away. Like we did with the last sheet, you'll want to gently blot the paper after you remove the mold, just to get rid of any of those other air bubbles and to really crisp up the design. And once you finish doing that, you'll let it dry as usual. Once your sheets are completely dry, you can remove them from the cardboard or towels. And if they have anything embedded in them that needs to be removed, you can peel that away, and then they're ready to use. Now you can turn all of your handmade paper into things like tags and stationery and even artwork that you can frame. And now that you know how to make paper, you can really have fun experimenting with different inclusions and designs.